Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch. We are now going to have a session of questions and answers. So there's going to be a few questions which people are urgently wanting to ask. But I want to ask a first question because, Michael, you've spoken about Pope John the 23rd and Pope Paul the 6th and Pope John Paul the 2nd. Of course, I think all of us have been quite amazed at the interfaith interest of Pope Francis, particularly in relation to Islam. I wonder if you could just tell us how you see the significance of Pope Francis in this area.
I had met Pope Francis in Buenos Aires at a meeting of Jews and Christians, but it was the German cardinal who was head of the Christian Unity at that time, who was head of the delegation. So Pope Francis hardly said anything. I remember when he was elected, I looked at my diary. What did I say about him? Nothing, except that he's at the meeting, he said a spiritual word at the beginning. That was all. And he left the limelight to the German cardinal. But he has his own ways of going about things, and he insists on friendship. Before engaging in dialogue, you must establish friendship with people. And this he had done with the Jewish community in Buenos Aires and also with the Muslims. As an illustration of that, when he visited the Holy Land, he took Rabbi Skorka with him, and the Imam of the mosque also went. And so they prayed at the Western Wall together. But he established friendship with the Imam of al-Azhar, an institute in Cairo, which is an Egyptian institute with an international range of students. And he quotes this, I think, 9 times in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, all of us are brothers and sisters together. He says he was greatly encouraged by the Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyeb, with whom I met in Abu Dhabi. He signed a common declaration which had been prepared in Egypt and in Rome, in Arabic and in Italian, with the help of his secretary at that time, who happened to be an Egyptian. So Ahmad al-Tayyeb, relations had been cut off between Egypt and the Holy See on account of 2 speeches by Pope Benedict XVI, one in which he quoted an emperor, a Byzantine emperor, against Muhammad, and the second when he was speaking to diplomats, and he was after the bombing of 2 churches, one in Baghdad and one in Alexandria, and he said that the countries should be concerned with the protection of their Christian minorities. And the government of Egypt took exception to this. They thought he was calling on European countries to interfere in their affairs. He wasn't at all. But anyway, the nuncio, Egypt recalled their ambassador to the Holy See for discussions. The Holy See didn't recall me. I would have willingly gone to Rome for discussions or some holiday, but they didn't have the gumption to recall me. Instead, I was persona non grata in Egypt at that time with the Imam and also with the government. But attempts were made for the predecessor of the present Imam to come to Rome, which didn't happen. But the Imam himself decided to come to Rome. He was the first Imam ever to come to meet the Pope in Rome. And he invited the Pope to go to Cairo for a peace conference and to speak in this peace conference. And Pope Francis accepted this invitation. And then the Imam was invited by the community of Sant'Egidio to a peace conference in Rome. And he came with a delegation and asked for a second audience with Pope Francis. Pope Francis received the delegation on a Wednesday morning after the main audience for the general public. The atmosphere was rather formal until Pope Francis asked the Imam, "Do you have a program for the rest of the day?" "Well, I have to go to this conference in the evening, but for the rest, I'm free." "Have you made arrangements for lunch?" "No." "Would you come for lunch with me?" "Yes, willingly." I don't know whether he had told the sisters that he would invite 5 people for lunch. But anyway, during lunch, the atmosphere became more friendly, and it was there that the proposition was made of having a common document. And he has continued in this line. For instance, when he visited Iraq, he made sure that he would greet the leading Shiite in Iraq, Sistani. And I can pass this round. This is a comic book made of this visit of the Pope to Iraq and his meeting with the president of Iraq and the peoples of Abraham. So if you like to make sure that it comes back to me. I like to be friendly, but not giving away things.
You lose them. Yeah.
So
very good.
I was sent this recently.
Excellent, excellent.
And he continues with this friendliness, and he has appointed as you may have seen, he created a cardinal recently, an Indian, Kukavad, who is the person in charge of arranging his journeys outside of Italy, or even within Italy. But he has appointed him, and I met Cardinal Kukavad recently, and I said to him, I think your appointment proves two things. One, that Pope Francis likes to appoint people he trusts, and you are obviously a person he trusts. And secondly, that he is willing to journey for meeting people of other religions.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that to Pope Francis himself, but no doubt he would agree with that.
Oh, I'm sure. That's fascinating, the development of Pope Francis' relations with Islam. Of course, you might say, well, a lot of the work with Judaism has been done, relations with the Jews improved no end since the council. But there's this spectre at the moment now of Gaza. And how is that? Do you have any idea of how the whole experience of the war of Israel against Palestine, how that is going to impact on dialogue between Christians and Jews, and how do we just pretend that Gaza's not there, or do you have any idea of how we can involve that in our discussions, because it's such a monumental development?
When I retired from Egypt, I went to live in Jerusalem, where we have a community since our founder's time. We have been there since 1878. I lived there for 6 years, but I can't answer your question. What I can say is that I experienced, prior to Gaza, the discrimination against Palestinians, which has been going on for so long. And you could see young people, young Israelis, both men and women, patrolling the streets and making young Palestinians stand up against the wall while they are searched. And our workers were not able to live in Jerusalem. They lived outside, and they would come in every day through the checkpoint, and sometimes the checkpoints were closed. As you may know, the World Council of Churches has an accompaniment, people who volunteered to spend 3 months in the Holy Land, and they monitor what is going on at the checkpoints to see that Palestinians are treated with respect. And they also protect school children going to school, because very often they are stoned. And so if there are people around observing, the military tend to do less. because they know that these observers come from all over the world and they will publish what they have seen. Of course, the government of Israel doesn't like this and accuses the World Council of Churches of being anti-Israel. They're just for human rights. Now, up in Liverpool, we had relations with Jews and Muslims, but we were unable to bring them together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the Jewish communities in this country feel very insecure at the moment, and they don't wish to have relations with other people. Mm. So it's very difficult at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it is not just the 7th of October and the repression of Hamas. It's the whole question of Israel and Palestine. To my mind, Israel needs to be a country of the Middle East and not a country of Europe. So its teams shouldn't play in European football, and they shouldn't be part of the European Song Contest. They have to make friends with the Arab countries. Now, that's very difficult, but it's the only solution, I think.
Okay, I think there may be some questions from... thank you for that. It's a very delicate question, but let's see what we have from the floor now.
First of all, thank you for that very enlightening talk this morning. I was particularly interested in the emphasis you placed on the meeting of people and doing things together as opposed to having religious discussions, because it gives such an opportunity to establish relationships, which is, for me anyway, the path forward for that. Just a little question on does the Holy See have any contacts in Syria, given what has happened recently? And secondly, what hopes do you have for North Africa, given that you have spent time there and your Missionaries of Africa have done so much work there and so many martyrs? What hopes do you have for that part of the world? Thank you.
Well, Syria, there are still bishops in Syria who were captured, taken prisoner, and we don't know more than 10 years ago, with Father Dall'Olio, an Italian Jesuit who had founded a monastery in Syria. We don't know what has happened to them, whether they're still alive or not. Pope Francis sent the head of the dicastery for Oriental churches to Syria recently to find out at first hand what can be done, what the situation is. He also made the nuncio in Syria a cardinal some years ago. Now that is against tradition. Tradition says that no nuncios are cardinals when you're in exercise. But Pope Francis believes in the tradition of the Church with a capital T, but not in the traditions of the Church. Traditions that have grown up. So he felt free to appoint this man who had been previously in Sri Lanka, where there was civil war going on. He had been nuncio there, and then he was appointed to Syria, and civil war broke out in Syria. So he's still a cardinal, and he's still the nuncio there. He hasn't been moved elsewhere. What the solution is, I don't know. The Christians, according to information that we receive, are very suspicious of the present government, the present leader, who is from an Islamist movement, though he says he's no longer Islamist and he's reverted to his ordinary name. But they have to have confidence. You have to be able to have relations with people, and so I think they should, well, keep a grain of salt, maybe, but not a whole salt cellar full of salt, so that relations would be poisoned or made difficult. I think they have to build up relations.
And did you want to say something about North Africa?
North Africa,
yeah.
Yes. We were founded in Algeria, which is very difficult at the moment. Algeria, the government will not give visas to priests, so we appoint people to Algeria and they're not able to go there. Whereas Tunisia, next door, has quite a different atmosphere, and where people can go and work there. And Libya, of course, is North Africa as well, but Libya is in shambles, so you can't count on that or anything. I don't know what the future, a new bishop, there was a British bishop in the Sahara, a member of our society, a missionary of Africa, Major McWilliam. He was the bishop. He had been working in North Africa and was our superior in North Africa. And then he was made the bishop of the Sahara, and he has just had his resignation for age accepted, and a new bishop has been appointed, who was the rector of the Institute of Arabic Studies in Rome. He was on a sabbatical in Oman, doing parish work in Oman and speaking Arabic. But I got word that he is to be ordained a bishop on the 19th of March in the Vatican. I don't know any details what this means. He's Spanish, but presumably it's not possible to have this ceremony in Algeria at the moment. So he will be ordained in Rome and then go to Algeria. We have to keep on trying and establishing relations. His predecessor and as Bishop of the Sahara had worked in the Sahara as a priest, but he had another job. He apprenticed himself to a maker of plates, copper plates, and he learnt the trade of doing that. So he's a copper bishop. I ordained him and I ordained McWilliam as well. I haven't heard about the third one. I think it may be Pope Francis himself, if with your prayers he recovers from his pneumonia in time for the 19th of March.
Thank you. This goes across all religions, beyond Christianity and Islam. It seems to me, in the modern world, we have people who are arguing in favour of the rightness of their own beliefs or their own religion. Dogmatism or fundamentalism in various forms. What can we do to try and restore a balance in favour of acting in line with an open and loving relationship with God wherever we are coming from? And can we rise above political interests?
Well, I think we have to realize, first of all, that there are, as you say, fundamentalists in all different religions, but they're not usually the majority. There are many other people who have different views, and we have to listen, encourage them to speak and listen to them and broadcast their views. And we have to be careful ourselves to be open. I think if we are open ourselves, we will find that there is a response. There is an important document that not the one signed by Pope Francis and the Imam of al-Azhar. That is important too, and it gives a whole program for dialogue. It's worth reading. You can get it on the Vatican in the journeys of Pope Francis in English. You can find it in the 4th of February 2019. That was when it was signed, and it gives the document there. It's worth reading. But there is another document that was brought out by the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, together with the World Council of Churches and the World Pentecostal Alliance. It's preaching the gospel the ethical dimension of preaching the gospel today. So you can't go into a country and denigrate all the spiritual leaders of that country, which sometimes happens. So the fact that these different bodies signed up to this document is important, though the document is not known at all. The secretary, the present secretary of the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, edited a volume of contributions on this theme, the ethics of preaching the gospel. After 10 years from the document, so it's written in different languages.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any more to say about that.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, Derek.
Your Eminence, I think it's more or less been covered by the last questioner, but where, with dialogue, are we spending most of our valued time in dialogue in talking in generalities and in what we can do together, and where, like things like conversion and so on, we're not aiming to convert one another immediately on the spot, I take it, but that must be in people's minds all the time.
I recommend to you a document that was published in 1984, yesterday. The attitude of the Church towards the followers of other religions, or reflections and orientations on dialogue and mission. It is known as Dialogue and Mission for short. And it was followed up by another document in 1991, Dialogue and Proclamation. But the Dialogue and Mission has a paragraph on the call to conversion. According to the Second Vatican Council, missionary proclamation has conversion as its goal, that non-Christians be freely converted to the Lord under the action of the Holy Spirit, who opens their hearts so that they may adhere to him. Pope Francis is often condemning proselytism, forcing people to adopt a religion. We can't do that. So, freely converted. In the context of dialogue between believers of various faiths, one cannot avoid reflecting on the spiritual process of conversion. In biblical language and that of the Christian tradition, conversion is the humble and penitent return of the heart to God in the desire to submit one's life more generously to him. So that's really what we're aiming at in our relations with people of other religions, that they should take God more seriously and respond to the way they see that God is leading them. And we have to do the same. So that's why we have to examine our consciences every evening. Was I on this path or not?
I think we've kind of.
Anyone else?
Have you got your hand up? Any hands up? No. Well, we've put Cardinal Michael through it, and he's given us some fascinating new insights, and the sheer breadth and depth of this whole area of interfaith dialogue and how it's been developed by the Church. The point is that not a lot of Catholics know this, and perhaps what today has achieved is that quite a few more Catholics now appreciate the important work that has been done over the decades and is still being done under the leadership of Pope Francis now. So once again, on your behalf, I'd like to thank Cardinal Michael for coming all the way across London to spend this time with us today, and to wish him every blessing in his continuing retirement and the work that he continues to do for the harmony of religion. So thank you very much, Michael.